Otherwise, stay with us because we've got Chris and Shrestha about to join the stage. Hey there, welcome.
Thank you.
So, which of the two of you is going to present your slide deck?
I am already.
Thanks, Shrestha. So let's see that. Okay, that's great. That's up. I'll jump off the stage and leave you to it. Great to have you here. Excited to hear your talk.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Greetings, everyone, from Australia. About API-led engineering excellence and the journey that we have gone through at NBNCO. I'm Shreshta Shyamsundar, Senior Principal at Infosys, and we have with us Chris Cullin, the General Manager, DevSecOps, Excellence at NBN. So among other things, we will be going into the whole concept of engineering excellence, and also going to discuss the outcomes of and our experiences through that arrangement, as well as going a bit into why we went into that and what we kind of got out of it. But to kick things off, I'd like to invite Chris to give us a brief and let us give us a sense of where we're going to go from here.
All right, Chris? Thanks, Shrestha. And in keeping with Australian customs, I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which at least Shrestha and I meet today, and anyone else joining from Australia, and to pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples that are joining us here today. So Shrestha, we were talking earlier about why we're signed up for the conference and why we're here. And I thought it was worthwhile just kicking off with that. So back late in 2019, early 2020, we set off on a program to improve our software development practices across 13 engineering chapters, as we call them, and 70 largely autonomous development teams. And we established an approach called engineering excellence that we'll dive into a little bit more detail and touch on APIs and microservices. And it generated some really good results, and what I consider to be in a relatively short period of time. And in my career, I've not seen this type of approach before or these type of results. And Shrestha and I felt compelled to share our story in the hope that it might help others on their journey through our APIs and microservices.
Thank you for that, Chris. Given the audience is largely international, it might be worthwhile to start off with what NBN is and what kind of business it's in.
Right, so we're both here. Infosys and NBN have got a partnership that goes on for about 10 years, and our relationship is in the software development area. NBN is a government-funded enterprise in Australia, and we're a wholesaler of broadband services, and we've got the specific purpose of lifting the digital capability of Australia and all Australians. And we've built a national broadband network pretty much from scratch. So in 2009, we were established, and we've rolled out a broadband network over 10 years. And that network includes multiple access technologies, just to give you a feel for what we're talking about here. Everything from fixed line, wireless, satellite, fiber optic, HFC coax, are all of the access technologies. So in 10 years, we've deployed that network from a standing start, built a telco, and connected 8.3 million homes and 12 million businesses. And as fortunes would have it, we were nearing the completion of that rollout just as the COVID lockdowns hit the world and hit Australia. So it served the country fairly well.
While you were talking, Chris, some of the newspaper clippings kind of caught my eye, where it talks about the impact that NBNCO had in Australia, particularly given that despite a majority of the population working from home, we actually saw an improvement in the internet speeds by 5%, whereas some of the other countries in the world, over 100 of them, actually saw a drop. And another point that I can see here is the difference in color plays that you're going on the southern slide. You have the waterfall and scaled agile being discussed. What's going on over there?
Well, setting up it's not every day people set up a telco from scratch. Normally they take hundreds of years to sort of build this level of infrastructure. So as we commenced, we were in very much project mode. I wasn't around at the time at 2009, but it was very much a project with a lot of focus on time, and time was really the main objective to hit project milestones. And we started our software development cycle building the IT infrastructure for NBN in a waterfall methodology. But as time progressed, as we matured through our practices, as we matured progressed through the deployment of the NBN, we evolved our software development practices from waterfall to agile. And we really embraced agile around about 2016. We were still developing large, complex, heavily integrated, tightly coupled systems at the time, and we embraced scaled agile using the SAFe framework. But as we progressed through that, past the build complete, and we progressed on to engineering excellence there. And our challenges started to become a little bit different. The SAFe model, or any scaled agile model, includes continuous improvement within the streams, IP sprints within a program increment, using SAFe terminology. And that was very good for improving capabilities within an IT stack, within an application stack. But in areas such as APIs and microservices, we need to make those improvements across the 70 largely autonomous development teams. So we needed a way of providing that holistic improvement. So we established a continuous improvement engine, and we call that engineering excellence. And that's what you see on the right-hand side there.
Thank you, Chris. So from what I get from what you just said, that as a continuous improvement engine, you set up the construct of engineering excellence. And this would be sort of a conduit working with the 13 different chapters in order to get the business benefits that you were after, and as well as bring that element of standardization and consistency. But what was this charter? What did you expect out of engineering excellence as part of this initiative?
Well, as I mentioned, it was really in the pursuit of continuous improvement, always looking, as most organizations, looking to deliver efficiency, productivity gains in the process of software development, but also to accelerate the time to value and just really drive out inefficiencies and become much more of a lean organization. So what we did, and this is where I think the approach started to become somewhat unique, at least in my experience, is that we couldn't do it within the IP sprints. We were challenged to do it within the IP sprints within each of the independent development teams. So of the 13 chapters, we actually recruited a couple of engineers from each of those chapters and centrally located them in this group in engineering excellence. And that became the engine for continuous improvement. And it wasn't 2 weeks in a 3-month quarter program increment. These people were full-time focused on continuous improvement. So we had this setup where we had a central team of engineers working to improve the process for engineers. So it was engineers improving the work for engineers. And it certainly has worked very well. And being engineers, you can see on the diagram here, they know where they spend their time. They know where the time sinks are. They know where the points of friction are in the process. Now, not all of them are time wasters, if you like, or time sinks. Some of these points are required for governance, overall governance of the business and for control. But quite a few of them turned out to be process inefficiencies. So there was plenty of work going into the top of the funnel. And then the team established a way of prioritizing the work, and it was looking at what's the cost to implement, or what's the time to implement some of these improvements, and what was the simplification opportunity here. And we put all that together, prioritized the list of improvements, and out the bottom of the funnel popped a prioritized program of work. And that's was executed on and continues to be executed on. But for each of those items too, it was important, and we'll touch on this over and over, but it's important to have a business realization value of these things so we can show the improvement that was made by standardizing APIs as an example. It's not just technology for the sake of technology. We had to translate it into business value. And that's sort of engineering excellence. But to answer your question very, very specifically, the purpose of this was to drive efficiency and time to value improvements across the organization.
So basically leverage the team interactions and dynamic that exists between them, get a sense of how what kind of activities needs to be executed, put it through those considerations, and eventually get out a bunch of initiatives to help you measure what matters and tell that story in terms of the value realized as part of this initiative. So that's what I would take away from this. And some benefits that you actually got at the end of the model once this was in execution.
Yeah, and some of these, Shrestha, some of the benefits were quite simple, and I'll highlight a couple of those and get to the more involved ones. But remember, you've got to take into consideration the context here that we were building a national broadband network in a very short period of time. So the focus is on time, and you accumulate some technical debt as you're going through, and you've got 70 autonomous teams. Quite often, they might be redeveloping APIs that exist in a neighboring team or building APIs in slightly different ways. But most of the work improvements have been around just improving the flow of daily work through the process of software development. So things like standardizing IDE environments, development environments, and making them role-based. As we bring on engineers, getting them productive on day one instead of having an engineer spending a week of their engineering time developing or setting up their own IDE environment. Things like uplifting and standardizing CI/CD pipelines across the groups, or standardizing containerization methodologies in deploying into cloud or into hybrid environments. But the one I sort of want to touch on and spend the rest of the session on is APIs and microservices. And I'll turn it around a little bit, Shrestha, because you joined NBN at about this time as an international expert on APIs and microservices. And we have this environment, 70 largely autonomous teams, all have their own way of doing things. How did you go about identifying the improvements of around the area of APIs? How did you go about identifying what needed to be done?
That's a great question, Chris. Talking to the part that you mentioned around the funnel about the top half, which is the ideation exercise, and having those conversations yielded 3 key challenges right about the time I joined. We were looking primarily at API onboarding at NBNCO, and the idea was to make it a bit more efficient, bring down the amount of time it took from start to finish. And in that process, look at the APIs from the point of view of how performant they were, how resilient they were, and what kind of information they sort of yielded to the teams that were managing them. And in that process, we were also looking at optimizing build efforts of these services themselves. And the focal point there was to help the management teams to get a sense of, am I able to predict the amount of time a typical service would take to build? At the point in time when we started, this was an area that we wanted to take a look at. And given the improvements in this space at the time, microservices template as we like to call it, seemed to be the way to go. So for those unfamiliar with the term, we were looking to consider it as a set of codified instructions where we are baking it into something like a boilerplate and baking some of the attributes or capabilities to ensure resilience, to look at telemetry, observability, all part of that standardized boilerplate. And we, from our conversations, we understood that the widely used programming languages in NBN were largely Java, Python, and we wanted to make these templates available in those languages in order to aid adoption, make it easier for teams to assimilate it into their existing piece of work as a brownfield initiative, or even for greenfield initiatives as well. And in that process, when we were talking to the developers and we got a sense of which are the areas that they are spending a lot of time. One key motivation for us was to make sure that these templates take away all of their unproductive routines, especially when it comes to development, and allow them enough time to focus on activities that require higher order thinking, such as the capability or the responsibility that the services has to espouse. And that was the direction of thinking that we went about in terms of this template. We wanted to make it absolutely easy to use, pretty much invisible, and just bring out specific behaviors primarily through configuration, make it easier for them to not worry about this and just focus on the key capability that they were required to build. And the results from the adoption phase were quite remarkable. We saw that the amount of decisions that developers have had to make went down considerably. They were focusing on the more important decisions. The variable cost typically associated with aspects such as, okay, where do I log this? What kind of security do I need? What kind of observability requirements do I have to fulfill? What kind of reports do I need? All of that went away. They were just focused on delivering specific requirements, specific capabilities, and net, we were able to reduce the variable cost of building these services. And because they were available in languages that were widely in use in NPN, we were able to get consistent, widespread adoption with many engineering teams as part of our phase 1 and phase 2 rollouts. And we were able to bring the nuances that the teams were after primarily through configurations, making it that much easier for them to sort of adopt this template. So in saying that, we identified the challenges. We made sure that developers are spending as much time towards activities that require maximum human intervention with maximum human intuition with minimal human intervention. And that's how we went about this particular initiative.
Right. And there were certainly some pretty impressive results there. The APIs were more predictable across the different platforms, and there were operational benefits as well. And Shrestha, the previous speaker spoke about collaboration and teamwork. A lot of the engineering teams at the time that you were coming in were used to working fairly autonomously. How did you go about getting alignment across the teams?
That's a great point, Chris. It's an important point too. When you come up with ideas of this nature, leveraging the framework that we had with engineering excellence, it was important to understand the group dynamic involved, understand the teams that you're looking to have your templates adopted. And when you identify some of the influencers or unicorns or people who are strong and have strong opinions and are sort of guiding the team, we identified them and collaborated with them, got a sense of what their thinking is, assimilated their feedback into our product, and took it back to them, and we earned their trust periodically. And after a period of time, when we got to a point where they were ready to implement it, we saw a magical change happen where we were able to build an environment of internal sponsorship. We had customer advocates typically taking the product that we had built and demonstrating it to other teams and saying, look, these are the benefits we got from implementing them. These templates helped us reduce API onboarding time. These templates reduce the cost and give us a more predictable schedule. And they are more performant. The number of incidents were also reduced over a period of time. And through the community of practice that we set up with these influencers or unicorns across the multiple engineering teams, we were also able to inner source and set up a framework that we could constantly keep updating these templates. We had a template launched, and we also created an ecosystem to maintain the life cycle of these templates. So whenever new changes need to come in, the community takes ownership of it, decides what changes need to be prioritized, develop it, and then share it at scale. Because they were all on the template, they automatically would receive updates. And this helped us increase our adoption scope and get more and more teams onto this bandwagon.
Thanks, Shrestha. I mean, Shrestha and I could go on and talk about hours of this, and we're talking over a year's worth of work here, and we're summarizing this in 15 minutes. But thanks for sharing, Shrestha. And these aren't events either. You don't just deliver an API template as a set of static artifacts. You continue to invest in these over time, embrace principles like inner source. And over the last 15 minutes, we've shared our story on continuous improvement. And in closing, I'd just like to summarize the three primary call-outs, the three primary takeaways. Having a dedicated engineering chapter with a charter of continuous improvement has worked very, very well. And making that chapter or staffing that chapter with engineers from the engineering team, so you've got engineers working for and with engineers, has just been a recipe of success for us and worked very, very well. The second key takeaway that Shrestha just sort of spoke about there with collaboration and forming the top of the funnel was by working with engineers on this, the engineers know what needs to be done. So having that ground up approach and not dictating across engineering teams of what needs to be done, but asking them where their pain points are, listening to them, and then giving them the time and the space to actually make these improvements. And that's definitely been beneficial around the APIs and microservices. And the third item, just as important, is to be able to translate the technical savings and the technical changes that have been made into business value. And having business value metrics, measuring what really matters, has been key to a sustainable model here and key to ongoing investment in this area. And we're doubling down on our engineering excellence approaches now, more in a DevSecOps model, but we're continuing to invest. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time and hand over. If there's any questions, Shrestha and I would be pleased to take them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great presentation, and a lot to think about there. A lot really to share as far as best practices. I love that center, the excellence team. It's like the team topologies, team models out of Brisbane, I think. That they've sort of mapped out using reverse Conway's law to be able to identify, and that sort of excellence team really taking hold and being able to demonstrate how that works is really useful. One of your points, you talked about the standardizing of the APIs, and that really helps from that engineering excellence team, and how that helps support and grow the infrastructure and the work you're doing at a level of quality. Standards are so crucial for developing open ecosystems, but sometimes developers just want to get in and quickly build it. So they don't necessarily go to the standards. They just want to build something and get it out there. How do you change that? Did you find that was a resistance point, or how do you get people to take on those standards, whether that be internal with Style Guide or industry-led standards?
I think that maybe I'll jump in first, and Shrestha, you can add some color there. I think it's about creating the easiest path. The easiest path has got to be to the standards model. And the engineers want to work on, as Shrestha said, the higher value tasks. So the repeatable and the mundane, if you like, template all of that. But you've got to make your libraries, you've got to get your inner source model all working. Shrestha, did you want to add some color to that?
Absolutely. So in addition to what Chris just said, when we had a chat with the engineers, and especially the ones who were looking to try out something new, and they also there were a few who wanted to get their requirements built and shipped out as quickly as possible. What we gave them as an option is, if these are the set of activities that you obviously need to do, because there are certain standards you'll have to meet from an NFR, non-functional requirements point of view, we take all of that away. And when we are able to demonstrate that this actually can happen, and this is the value you get, the reception was quite good. It's just being able to explain it and communicate it in a language they understand. That was critical, and also earning their trust through repeated demos, having different people converse with them, helped improve on that metric.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's I know that's something that a lot of scaling companies struggle with. So really great practical advice there. Thank you both. Really great to see some fellow Australians here. Greetings from Europe. I hope it's good there. Thanks very much. I invite you to leave the stage now.